Okay, so this is our bass, and I'm just gonna sweep up with my audition mode on. So there's our low note, is like 60. So we're really using like 60 to 140. Okay. So I'm just going to do a little bracketing while I'm here and cut out the low end that I don't hear. The tone, as we said, really kicks in around 60, so I'm just going to leave an extra bit of trim here and trim everything below that. Okay, and now let's take a look at the drums. So this kick drum, I can solo it by opening this up, clicking on the kick drum. Wow, this is a kind of a complicated setup they have. There's a couple of nested instrument racks, but if that's my kick, I can solo it. And I'll take a look at its frequency here. Okay, so we're getting tone also about 50. Oh, the other one was about 60. Okay, so here's where we start getting a lot of the punch of the kick. And so I'm inclined to boost that so that it speaks more in that range. And maybe notch out just a little dip around at 60, which is where that really important low fundamental note of the bass is. So I'm going to do a kind of a high Q here and turn it down. Oh, we want to cool. So we're just making a little space for the bass. And we're bringing out the punchiness of the drum, of the kick drum here. And now let's unmute the kick. Okay. So this is a quick and dirty. I might refine that some more, but that's the general idea. Okay, so now the bass. The bass is really just subtone. It doesn't have much high information going on. And that's, I don't know, a lot of basses do actually have some high information, which helps them be heard. I see this knob just on the instrument itself that adds a higher tone. Distortion also adds some high frequencies. So I'm liking this sound a bit better. This is probably, we can see what device this is. A saturator is this. Yeah, so this is adding saturation. So if you want to add some more brightness to a sound, you can use the saturator. I like this sound a bit better for the bass, just because it has a little more definition up high. So I'm going to add some of this overtone. Some of this distortion. And then get a rough balance on it with volume here. Cool. Quick pause for a question, just because this reminded me of something I wanted to say. I've been asked, what monitors and subs do I use to mix? And I just want to say I don't have a super duper setup myself. So I'm not a mixing engineer. I'm a composer who has done a lot of my own mixing over the years, but there are people who spend thousands and thousands of dollars on equipment and do this all day, every day, and have a level of mastery that that I neither have nor want, honestly, because I want to be spending my time creating music rather than mixing all the time. So I don't have anything fancy at the moment that I would want to tell you and brag about. If you want some recommendations from people who are deep in stuff like this, I'm welcome to. I can go looking for you. Okay, so here's bass. We've got a brighter tone. I would usually compress bass. Let's take a look at it in the compressor. There aren't huge variations in volume. I mean, there are these big notches, but that's when the note isn't playing. Because this is a synth bass, there's not the same kind of like lot of random variation as if you're playing a bass instrument. So we could compress it a little bit, but there's not I don't know if we're gonna get much for that. So as I did in the compression lesson the other day, pull down the threshold until I'm chopping off some of the tops of the sounds. I'm in this third view here. You show this screen by clicking this button. And then I turn up the output. I'm not getting much gain reduction, really, before I'm just chopping the entire sound. So I'll turn up the output a little bit to make up for the loss. And now let's compare the compressed sound to the uncompressed sound. I guess I can hear a little bit more presence with the compressor on. But we don't need a ton. Okay, let's keep going up. All right. So we've got a couple of layers of guitar, this beautiful background layer. They all have pretty different roles, so I'm actually inclined to not group them, even though they're all guitars. These two should be grouped, but this ambient layer I'm gonna pull out to its own thing, so that it doesn't, so just because I feel like a group is for things that you want to mix in the same way to have the same role. And even though this is a guitar, the role that it's playing in the texture is really, really different. So we've got an ambient loop. He's made this with the looper. We've got a beat repeat on it that's giving it some glitching. That's very cool. He's got it going through a compressor and a little bit of delay and reverb already. I'm gonna undo the reverb because I want to do reverb fresh. Let's see what this delay is doing. Nice. So we're getting a little stereo spread because he's made the right ear be a little bit ahead of the left ear with this delay offset control. So that's adding nice width and depth to the sound. Okay, so next thing I want to do is the same I want to do on every track, which is some EQ. I want to bracket it by chopping off the bottom end until I hear the sound changing. I'm going to use the audition here just to scan up and listen for when stuff I care about starts happening. Okay, I'm starting to get some tone, so I don't want to lose this. So I'll pull back from there, but everything down here is just rumbly noise that we don't need. Next question is just how bright or dark do we want this? And I think that that's a contextual question based on where our lead is going to sit. So I'm going to table EQ for now on this layer. And we'll also circle back about reverb. Are you talking about scrolling this way and that way, Dreadbone? I'm just doing, I guess I've got a magic mouse or a trackpad. But you can also, you have a representation of the entire chain down here, and you can click and drag anywhere on here to change the visible window. Cool. All right, let's look at the main guitars. We've got 2 layers. This one is that stuff. I'm just seeing visually that we've got some regions that are really loud and some that are less loud. If these are all going to share a track and share a role in the overall mix, I would guess we want them visually to be more aligned on this early gain level. So I'm just going to check and see if this, which looks like I'm getting more of a match between here and here, I'm going to check audibly and see if that's the case. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I've dropped it down to 2.7. Drop this down. Just, you can type right in -2.7. Oh, -2.7. There we go. And cool. It's always better to get a general balance with this gain slider on all of your regions. You know, they don't necessarily have to be balanced, but if one part is supposed to be softer in the song and the other part is supposed to be louder, you can make that so. It's just easier to do that than to have a really complicated automation for your volume here. We want to keep this as simple as possible. So do your gross tuning here, and then we can do fine tuning later. Okay, so let's think about this sound. I see he's using the same effect. I like this delay thing. We'll think about reverb separately. So I'm going to take off the reverb here. He used the looper to create this, but we're not using it now, so I'm going to take that off as well. First thing to do is EQ. So again, I'm going to sweep up, put on audition mode, sweep up until I start to hear tone. All right, this is all just like finger noise, except for that. Okay, so we want these sounds. But already you can hear that that's just a cleaner sound. Now, I want to add a little more brightness to this. The jazz guitar sound, is often more muted and flat than like a rock and roll guitar, but I still want this to be brighter. So I'm going to do a high shelf and sweep until I really hear. This is a kind of a boxy part of it. This is a really beautiful kind of shimmery part of it. So I want to start boosting from there. And again, when you're doing tone shaping, you want to make small moves. Maybe even scoop a little of this part that's going to get a little muddy. Nice. Okay. So that's got... I'm going to boost this just a little more. Cool. I like that a lot. Cool. And I see there's a little bit of compression on here, but it's very subtle. So I can think about whether or not I want compression by looking at the waveform. And I see that some notes are quite a bit louder than others. And, you know, we want to keep that because that's part of the expressive quality of his playing, but we can compress it a little bit and bring the quieter ones a little closer to the louder ones, and we'll get a more even tone, which will make it easier to mix and make the sound more present. So I'm going to go back here. Threshold. Let's go to this section where there's well-defined separate notes. Okay, so I'm going to pull down the threshold to chop off the tops. I'm going to turn up the ratio. 4 is a good kind of medium setting. Again, this is a knob just for basically the initial punchiness of the sound. If there's a fast attack, it's going to catch the initial moments of the sound and make it less punchy. So I'm going to dial this back until I start to hear a nice, natural kind of sparkly punch at the beginning of the sounds. Sounds nice. Is much too much release. Cool, now we see it responding more on the note level. If we're here, then it's responding on like a whole phrase long level, and that's just not going to get much definition for these tones. Okay. Drop the threshold so I'm also getting a little bit of the quieter notes. Great. And now I'm going to switch to output here. We're seeing here, if you missed the last class, the difference between the input is the dark gray behind, and the output is the light gray line on front. And so we can see that the compressor here has turned down the volume on the peaks, and so then we can turn up the volume here to make up for it. Cool, so that's nice here. I'm going to turn it on and off and we can listen and compare. Yeah, I like that a lot. It just sounds more present. Great. I'm actually going to nix the delay here, and we'll do reverb and delay as its own thought process for the whole track. We didn't check this second layer. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this whole thing and copy the same effects from here onto this track, because we want basically the same sound. Cool. All right, we'll loop back when we talk about space to delay and reverb. one more quick note based on a question from compression. Compression works by lowering the peaks and then raising the volume. So the first stage is that it makes the loudest parts softer, and then you can make the entire thing louder, which has the effect of making the low points louder rather than... You can think about it as making the low points louder, but what's actually happening is that you're squashing the peaks first and then lifting everything. Okay, here we go to the bells. Nice, nice. Okay, we'll take off reverb and do it all at once. Let's EQ it. What's all of this low stuff? Really in the mix, we want these bells to just ride on top. We don't want them muddying anything below. So this is all just like the beater. This is... But here we start getting some tone, so I don't want to lose much of that. So I'm going to pull this down and then maybe do a more gentle slope here so I don't accidentally cut too much. So we've got these bells we can see are happening. We've got a lot of fundamental frequency and some harmonics. Let's just listen to those harmonics. Nice. So this is where these bells are really going to shine. Remember our guitar range was all down here. And so we want to emphasize the bells where they're going to be unique in the spectrum and make a little more space for the guitar down here. So I'm gonna... Maybe I'll be a little dramatic about it and really actually scoop some of this low. Cut some of this low fundamental of these notes. So we're losing some of the warmth, but I'm gonna guess that this is gonna work better with the guitars because it'll keep them out of the way, the mid-range, and it'll make them sparkle on the high end where there's more empty space. So may loop back to this to refine it. And let me see about the second bell layer. Is the sound much different? No, same sound. So actually I want to put this EQ on the whole group. Okay, so that's a rough bell sound. Let's go to the piano. So this piano is a nice instrument that you can get from Ableton under packs. If you go down to, oh, I guess it's gone now because it's up here. Grand Piano, it's called. So, cool. Let's take off the reverb because again, we're going to do our own thinking about reverb holistically for the whole track. And now we have a question with the EQ. I see that built into this instrument, they've made a nice tone knob that's just going to make it brighter or darker. And this is going to be a question that we need to answer in relation to the guitars. So the guitar and the piano are really in the same range. They're kind of in the middle of the piano range, octaves 3 and 4. Sorry, side note. I'm just noticing a little bit of glitching baked into the audio here. Jan, and I hear a similar glitching, maybe different quality in this one, which makes me think that this one sounds like you did warp markers to clean up timing, and then but then didn't switch to complex mode and left it maybe in beats or one of the others that have a little more glitching when you move sounds around. And then maybe you consolidated it to make a new audio file. That's what this is telling me. So just a side note, remember when you are doing warping of audio timing, it's really important that you listen, and if you hear artifacts that you don't like, switch to one of the other modes until it sounds better. Okay, so I'm going back to thinking about how the piano and the guitar sit together. Let me just look one more moment at what... So guitar is like 100 to 1,000 is the bulk of the warmth of it. How is that going to compete with piano? Okay, so the piano parts, here it's high, here it's low. So they're kind of trading off who's high and who's low. Okay, so this is maybe a bigger question than we should do today, but I think you understand the question is like, how do we get the guitar and the piano to coexist? I think that we want a warmer piano sound and a brighter guitar sound, because the guitar is really the lead. So I'm going to dial that in quickly here, and then we'll talk about space. So let's just go with a warmer piano sound. Actually, let's do it on the whole group. So I'm going to do a flat piano on the individual tracks, and then do EQ 8 on the piano as a whole. Do my normal bracketing thing where I cut the low end that I don't need. This is right in that kind of kick drum range. It's nice to have a bit of punch. I don't want to kill it all. I just am gonna maybe make a kind of gentle sweep down from there. And then, yeah, I'm gonna just think about darkening the piano a little bit to make space for guitar on top. And I'm going to leave it there. So that's my first pass. EQ, always, some compression sometimes. And then the next thing that I'm going to think about is space. And if you've been keeping up with the Thursday classes, this is the order that we're going in Thursday classes too. We did EQ first for clarity, compression second for presence. Next week we're going to do reverb and delay for space. Because that's the order that I think when I'm doing some mixing like this. So for space, I think it's best to use send-in returns. So send in return tracks. The return tracks are here. You can put effects on them, and then you can send sound to them with these boxes. These are the same as the send knobs here in session view, where you send some of the audio from this track into the return track to get some effects on it. So I'm going to set up... Let me just think about the overall vibe of this track. I think that it is natural. So we want things that sound real, like these instruments are actually coexisting in a real room somewhere, as if there's an actual band playing. I don't think it's a big space because there's just so much detail. Lots of short sounds. If you put them in like a concert hall kind of reverb, they get washed out. We want shorter reverb time for shorter sounds to get better clarity and definition on those sounds. So I'm picturing a room that's like a jazz club. That's like intimate, kind of has a vibe of an actual space, but isn't huge. So let's start with some reverb. We'll put a little from the drums. If I were going to go crazy with this, I might put different amounts of different drums. Let me see real fast. No. I would put different amounts of the different drums. Like it's nice to have on the snare to have a little bit more reverb and so that it kind of blooms, and on the hi-hats a little less reverb so they stay distinct. But for a quick mix like this, I'm going to just think about putting a little bit of drums overall into the space. So I'm going to solo the the reverb track. And we can just hear what's getting in there. So there's the drums. I think we want a lot of this guitar loop because we want it to sit in the background. We may do something even more for this. The lead guitars, we want to be in the space, but very present, so we don't want a ton of reverb on them. The bells, I think of these as also sitting back in the space. So there'll be maybe more a little more bell. Yeah. And then the piano. It also has to be in the room, so some of the things need to go through the reverb. But we want it to be still quite present. So I'll put less of it into the reverb. Oh, actually I want to do it on the group track. So just a little bit of that piano. Okay, now I'm going to unsolo the reverb track. And now take a listen. So reverb is at its best pretty subliminal. We don't want to be distracted by it. We want to feel like we're hearing the sounds very presently and clearly, and not really notice that they are also kind of washing together with this reverb. So I'm going to toggle back and forth the reverb on and off, and you can hear, see if you can hear the difference. This is off. Okay, on. It's subtle, but it's really nice. Now I'm going to turn it off, and you're going to miss it. Sounds more like a home studio demo. But also, let's think about the quality of this reverb. It's pretty washy. This week I'm going to go into all of the different aspects of this device. But for now, let's just listen to a couple of different presets. Small room. We have a short decay time. That sounds pretty good. That's a little clearer. This is a little more washed out. This is kind of muffled because we've got some filtering on it. That's nice, but maybe a little big. I don't think we want it dark. That's pretty ugly. I think that's kind of mushy and muddy. That's kind of mushy. So for my small room vibe, I like this the best. Well, let's see what wooden. I think this is my favorite. It's clear, it's kind of pretty sound. I can still hear the instruments fairly distinctly. Feels intimate. So last, let's think about this, the ambient layer. So I think that this could go into a much bigger space. So I'm actually going to take it out of the room and make my second return track be my like ambient long sound. And on it, I'm going to keep this delay. It's kind of nice just to make kind of a washed out thing. And then I'm going to do a big reverb. Yeah, and maybe even a little bit of auto pan, like slowly. So that it swirls left and right. Not a ton, we still want it to be mostly in the center, but just to give it a little motion. Cool, so the next step, I know we've just got a couple of minutes left, so I'll sketch out for you next steps. Now we've got really nice individual sounds. The next question is just picking relative levels for these tracks where they sound right, where they sound balanced. So that would be a bit of a process of one track at a time, adding a second track, like we'd start with the drums, add the bass, and pick a balance between them where they feel like they both have their due. And then build up from there and settle in each layer at the right volume level. Then let's just talk about the master track really fast. We're already in the ballpark. This sounds pretty good to me. Oh, but these bells are just too much. Put the guitar on the front. And the piano should be a little in the back, I think. Maybe different for different parts of the song. One thing I'm noticing is that this low bell part pretty lost. It's in the same octave as the guitar or just an octave Yeah, that's probably the same octave. I might bring this all up, which is to select the MIDI and hold Shift and press the up arrow. And they all go up an octave. Yeah, so we're trying to solve problems of competition for frequency spans. Okay, very quickly, we'll talk about the master track. You could put a multiband dynamics down. And here you can just adjust. So this is a compressor on the high, a different compressor on the mid, and a different compressor on the low. And you can just give a little bit of a rebalancing of high, mid to low here. We've got a lot of mid, I feel like. And then let's take a look with EQ 8. And here you might just do a little bit of gentle tone shaping if you want to make the track a little bit brighter. If you see a lot of stuff in the mid-range, it's probably going to sound pretty muddy, and you might want to scoop a little bit. But again, we're just talking about really small things here. Another thing I recommend doing is taking utility plugin preset. Let's put it here. Utility device, and switching to bass mono. So this puts everything below a certain cutoff point into mono, which is just going to work better for various reasons. Phase canceling problems, it'll work better on vinyl, where if you have panned low frequencies, it'll make the needle actually skip off the record, off the groove, and just makes things more clear and punchy down low. Okay, so now let's listen to the original track. I'm going to unmute it by clicking it and pressing 0. Solo it. That's before. And after. It's better, right? What do y'all think? Yeah, I think we're going in the right direction here. So that's our hour. I would love to stay with any of you here who want to stick around and tell me about your experience on Twitch. How did this go? Was this good? Did you have a bunch of, were there technical problems that I should know about? I might start doing all classes like this if it is better for everybody. Let's see. And as usual, if this is useful, send me a couple of bucks on PayPal. I'd appreciate it. Even just to see $1 from you would be like, that's awesome. There's a person out there that this was helpful to. Next class, we are going to continue with variation technique. So that's going to continue what we did last week with MIDI, but we're going to work with sound instead. And, audio tracks, effects, resampling. And then next Thursday, we're going to do reverb and space, which is the next topic of mixing. And then next Saturday is going to be another one of these studio classes. So I don't have anybody signed up for that yet. If you're interested, send me a project, and I will choose it based on kind of a pedagogical usefulness. Now I'm available for questions. Be aware that there is maybe 10-second lag between the chat, when I can see the chat and when you'll hear me respond. So be aware of that. But otherwise, thank you all so much, and see you next time. But yeah, I'm here if you have feedback. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, Jan, what do you think? How did it turn out? Is this useful? Yeah, Gianluigi, the EQ8 is just a lot better to work with. You have 8 nodes of shapes that you can make, and you have this visualization. So you can actually see the sound, whereas on EQ3, you don't see the sound. EQ3 is basically um, this. You've got one, you've got a low shelf, which is this. You've got a high shelf, which is this. You set their frequency left and right with this knob. Um, Frequency left and right is this knob. And then the gain in the mid is like a bump here. So you can do the same general stuff of brightening and darkening sound, but EQ8 is a lot better to work with if you have it. I guess it's not in light. But yeah, so use this, but picture this. Picture how low, medium, and high are ranges of the frequency spectrum that you define with these frequencies. And the best way to learn about what you're hearing is to actually crank one of these all the way up and then sweep the frequency, and you can hear which part of the sound it's affecting. Yeah, you bet. Thanks for showing up. Great question from Gabriella. How do I balance mixing as I go versus mixing at the end? She says, I find I have to mix some things as I go to make them sound halfway okay, but then waste too much time doing it when it would probably be more productive to just keep making music. Yeah, this is the balance. Um, This is a real situation where you can let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you're in the process of writing, but every time you make a sound, you spend a million years trying to make that sound perfect, then you lose all your momentum when you are mixing. No, you lose all your momentum when you're writing. But it is frustrating, it's difficult and demoralizing to write when the sounds that you're working with aren't good. It's just hard to work when things are bad. This should be easy for composers who are always working in MIDI and Sibelius or something, and it always sounds terrible, so you have to kind of like learn to ignore the terrible sound of what you're making. But that's not really the point of this. We want to be able to enjoy what we're doing while we're doing it. I mix as I go, but I just try not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Whenever I pick a sound, I think about problems it's going to have combining with other sounds. And so I do a little EQ to, just like find, set in rough terms where, if I want it to be, where in the spectrum I want it to be. Often doing some mixing or putting on effects and things is part of the compositional process. It's like, okay, you've got some little tiny short sound, you don't know what to do with it, you start putting effects on it, you've got delays and reverbs, you've got some distortion, and all of a sudden it's this like long, beautiful background layer wash. You got to do that kind of stuff. That's the composing, that's sound design that you're doing. And so you shouldn't like blanket say write first and then effects later. But I think that if you're always mixing a little bit, but first you'll get faster at mixing and you'll just make these decisions more quickly, more intuitively. Um, but just don't worry about fine tuning. So do your gross tuning as you write, because you just don't really have enough context and information to say like that you know exactly how you want something to be EQ'd. But you can know roughly how you want something to be EQ'd. When I came to those bells, it's like, well, certainly they're just up there to be high frequency information, so let's chop off the low end. That takes 2 seconds with some practice, and so I recommend doing that kind of thing as you go. But if you find yourself worrying about perfection, stop yourself, put that off till later. I got another question. How do you shrink the size of an MP3? Unfortunately, an MP3 is already a shrunk file. Full-size audio file is like a WAV or an AIFF. When you shrink that, you shrink it with an MP3 encoder and you get a much smaller file size. But any more compression than an MP3 will do will give you bad sound, so it doesn't exist. So an MP3 is already compressed audio. Cool. So one feature of the new platform is that I don't know who's still here. So if you're sticking around and have a question, give me a quick hey in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be saying goodbye in a couple of minutes. Oh, hey, Chris Scherer, I just opened up the Twitch window. I've been doing chat and Discord just because I didn't want to make everyone sign up for a new account for a new thing. But it does maybe make sense for us all to get Twitch accounts so that we can see who's present here. So yeah, I don't know when Chris posted these questions, but oh yeah, you're here. Cool. So yeah, the videos for Twitch will be up on Twitch, I think, for 60 days. I'm also doing recording a video to put on YouTube like usual, but I forgot to hit record on it for the first like 10 or 15 minutes today, so it won't be complete. So come up here for Twitch for the complete one if you want to come back. One more question about compression. Ableton, when you export, it only has one setting, and it is quite high quality MP3. You would need another program, and I'm not sure what they are these days, but you could look up an MP3 encoder and encode down to like 128 kbps, but I feel a little bad saying this just because like 128 kbps doesn't sound that good, especially on the high frequencies like hi-hats and stuff start to lose their definition. So I really don't recommend that. I think that yeah, compressing audio, you just lose quality when you compress audio. And so if you're having an issue with disk space, I think you get far better results investing in a external hard drive. You could spend $60 and get a huge hard drive now, rather than worrying about compressing your things more. Oh, too large to upload on Discord. Yeah, so uploading on Discord is limited, and but everyone's getting around it. You can do that by using Dropbox or Google Drive. If you have either of those services, you can upload a file there or anywhere on the cloud, and just post a link to the Discord, or you can get a SoundCloud account. That's what I would recommend also. You can get a SoundCloud account, upload your MP3s, and then just post a link here, and it'll actually play them inline. Gabriella asks, when do I use the glue compressor versus the normal compressor? Um, yeah, as I said last week, the glue compressor, I don't know how it's different. I don't know what is going on under the hood there, but I just know that Ableton recommends that you use glue compressor on drum sets. They describe the glue part as it being particularly good at taking things with lots of different layers and making them feel unified, gluing them together by balancing their volume levels internally. So yeah, try glue compressor on a drum set or any flow of sounds that is varied, that's heterogeneous, where there's lots of different kinds of material in it. And then I use the compressor on kind of simpler signals that just have one instrument or quality. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I'm going to end the stream here. We can keep the conversation going on Discord. I'm looking forward to hearing any music that you were making, and I'll see you Tuesday. Thanks.